Agus fáiltíim riban deis rátas í anamh an seo aniu faoin ról ríhabhachtach atá ag iarasóirí dúrisciú limistar equivalent ar fud an domhan. Time after time, journalists confront the very worst that is happening around the world, determined, sometimes at great risk to themselves, to report honestly and truthfully, not only on difficult and dangerous conflicts, but on corruption and the violation of human rights. The fundamental purpose of journalism, the pursuit of the truth, is absolutely vital to us as citizens. Without it, would we be left in the dark, at risk of being overwhelmed by disinformation, biased commentary and conspiracy theories. It is important to stress at the outset that risks to journalists fundamentally emanate not from the vocation of journalism itself, but from threats to journalists from states and criminal and paramilitary groups. UNESCO report that over 1,523 journalists have been killed since 1993 in the course of doing their jobs, a stark and very troubling number. To echo the words of Minister Coveney earlier, we are no strangers to such attacks on our own island. Let us recall the terrible killings of Lyra McKee, Martin O'Hagan and Veronica Guerin. They were each courageous and respected journalists. I have also been struck by the courage of those Irish journalists and camera operators, along with all of the support staff who provide us with essential reports from conflict zones around the globe. This is particularly evident in the continuing conflict in Ukraine. The death of Pierre Jotchesky, an Irish camera operator, alongside 24-year-old Ukrainian journalist and producer Alexandra Kushnova in Ukraine, demonstrates this courage. Pierre's funeral was held in Ireland in March. He grew up in my own constituency in Leopardstown, and he was an inspiration bigger than life, according to some of his friends and colleagues. It was through his journeys around Europe in his teens and later in Afghanistan and Pakistan that his fondness for photography and politics developed into freelance journalism. His qualities were endless. He lived life for the benefit of others. It was relayed at his funeral. It was also conveyed how Pierre was full of vision, innovative in his work and in the world, a truth teller, full of empathy, and what many refer to as a humanitarian. In many ways, journalists working in war zones often share some of these attributes, but the dangers they face can be great. In a separate but no less terrible incident, the shooting of Palestinian Al Jazeera journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the West Bank earlier this month is a stark reminder of the danger journalists face in conflict zones. Equally, I condemn the actions of Israeli police at the funeral of Miss Abu Akleh. These were horrific scenes of police brutality at a very sensitive event. The Palestinian American was a household name across the Arabic-speaking world, and I too am backing the international calls for an independent investigation into her killing. I also note that a delegation for relations with Palestine, which included 2 Irish MEPs, was recently informed by Israeli authorities that it would not be allowed to visit the Gaza region as a delegation. The delegation of 6 MEPs, including Green Party South MEP Grace O'Sullivan and Sinn Féin Midlands North West MEP Chris McManus, were due to arrive in Israel over the weekend en route to Palestine via Tel Aviv. However, at the last minute, the group was informed that the mission would not be going ahead. European Parliament President Roberta Metsola is currently visiting Israel and pledged to raise this issue. And I too echo concerns raised by my party colleague Grace O'Sullivan, as well as by the European Parliament President. Any threats to journalists, whether in the form of physical and online attacks, represent a threat to media freedom and the freedom of the press. We know that a free, independent and pluralistic media is a vital component in holding a state and powerful institutions to account. It has been said before that the first casualty of war is truth, and we have witnessed that in most recent times. The steps taken by the Russian state against their own independent media is a clear demonstration that they fear the truth about Russian aggression in Ukraine being shown and explained to Russian citizens, and to evading responsibility for what is being done by Russian forces in Ukraine. The framework for supporting an independent media includes a robust legislative and constitutional foundation for press freedom and an overarching framework for the regulation of the media that protects press freedom and promotes media plurality. As Minister for Media, I am keenly aware of the responsibility I and the Government have in providing the necessary legislative safeguards that promote a strong and independent media sector. The Government recognises that journalists and other media actors play a central role in enabling the full enjoyment of freedom of expression and are critical to the healthy functioning of our democracy. We must reinforce the protections afforded to journalists and other media actors engaged in work that is instrumental for the healthy operation of democracy. Media freedom is a core European value, given expression in the European Convention on Human Rights and the Charter of Fundamental Rights, and a cornerstone of democracy. Without freedom of the press, a well-informed citizenry cannot exist. Without a well-informed citizenry, democracy cannot function in any meaningful sense of the word. Journalists are a central component in our civil society, and a free media has been a powerful force for positive change and democratic transformation everywhere. All forms of attacks on journalists and other media actors must be regarded as attacks on democracy and strongly condemned. As we know from our own experience on this island, threats to journalists are not confined to countries that would traditionally be classified as zones of ongoing conflict. In recognition of the growing number of threats to journalists across the EU, in September 2021, the European Commission published a recommendation in relation to the safety of journalists. The recommendation calls on Member States to vigorously investigate and prosecute all criminal acts, making full use of existing national and European legislation. To support the recommendation, first announced in European Democracy Action Plan, the European Commission has also indicated that it will propose a European Media Freedom Act in response to growing concerns regarding diminishing media plurality, which can have a chilling effect on independent journalism. The Commission have indicated that the European Media Freedom Act will seek to ensure that the EU media market functions better by improving legal certainty, and will set out a mechanism to increase the transparency, independence and accountability of actions affecting media markets, freedom and pluralism within the EU. I support collaboration between Member States in order to safeguard media freedoms across the EU, and look forward to working with the Commission and other Member States when the Act is published. As Minister Coveney indicated, Ireland assumed the presidency of the Committee of Ministers at the Council of Europe last week. The Council of Europe have played an important role in promoting the independence of the media and security of journalists. The work of the Steering Committee on Media and Information Society of the Council of Europe has been particularly important. Last June, I attended the Conference of Ministers responsible for Media and Information Society, which adopted a resolution on the safety of journalists, setting out the importance of protecting journalists and setting out an enabling environment for media freedom. This Steering Committee on Media and Information Society are holding their 21st plenary session next week, at which the topic of journalist safety will be further considered, particularly in light of the conflict in Ukraine. All states have a duty to respect, protect and promote human rights, and it is crucial that journalists and other media actors, as part of civil society, have the space in which to do their jobs, free from violence and intimidation. A free and independent media is indispensable for democracy. I absolutely condemn any threats or attacks on individual journalists or on the foundations of the sector as a whole. We must treat these attacks with the utmost seriousness. Tá sé ríthobhachtach do struchtúr ar sucaí go leanamid ar aghaidh ag déanamh gach iireacht chun tacu le press déanachtach agus saor agus chun saibháltach irisóirí a cosint an seo an éireann agus thar lear.
Now, Untitled Chapter.